Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Carlo Romero, Senior Business Advisor for Partnerships at StreetEasy, and your host for today's webinar featuring StreetEasy economist Nancy Wu, StreetEasy product manager Peter Lim, and top New York City agent Scott Savory. Today's conversation is part one of our Fall Home Buyers series, a week of events designed specifically to answer your questions about each step of the home buying journey. We hope these conversations offer a solid foundation of knowledge about the process of buying a home in New York City. Later this week, we'll be speaking with finance industry experts on the topics of preparing your finances for a purchase and the steps of getting approved for a mortgage. Also, a quick call for your feedback for future events. Following this webinar, a brief survey will appear on your screen. We thank you so much for your time and really value your responses as they inform our content for the future. Now, a quick overview of what you can expect today. In a moment, I'll be welcoming StreetEasy economist Nancy Wu to the screen. The market is changing rapidly right now, but Nancy will walk you through her research on the current trends we're seeing. After Nancy shares her research, StreetEasy's own Peter Lim will share some useful insight on how to use StreetEasy to your advantage during your home search. Then I'll introduce Scott Savory, a top New York City real estate agent with the brokerage Compass. Scott and I will talk in depth about the home buying timeline and process and why working with a knowledgeable professional is so important. Following my conversation with Scott, we'll be digging into some of the questions you submitted upon registering for the event. So make sure you stay tuned to hear your questions answered. We'll answer as many questions as we can in the time we have. Okay, let's get down to business. I'd like to welcome StreetEasy economist Nancy Wu to the screen. You may recognize Nancy as a frequent author of original research on the New York City housing market. She's an expert on a variety of topics, including affordable housing, rent versus buy, and how recessions impact rents and pricing. And earlier this year, Nancy was named to Crain's New York 40 Under 40 list for 2021. I'm excited for you to hear her actionable insights, and I'll be right back after Nancy wraps up. Nancy, take it away.
Thank you, Carlo, and thank you everyone for being here today. I am Nancy Wu. I'm the economist at StreetEasy, and I live in this data day in and day out. So I know exactly how exciting the market is right now. We get new data every month, every quarter, and we release these reports on our StreetEasy blog. So always looking at different ways that the data is important for buyers, for renters, for sellers. And I have to tell you, it's a really exciting time to be an economist right now. And it's also even more exciting for buyers out there. Buying a home is a huge challenge. And right now, the New York City sales market is having a really busy quarter. So my goal today is to help you walk out with an idea of where the market is, and so you can make the best decisions when buying a home. So we'll start with a borough-wide overview of the sales market. So we're looking right now at the most recent data, which is from July 2021. And the best way to look at this data is through these colorful charts. And they may look scary, but don't worry, I'll walk you through with the most important takeaways. We're looking right now at the StreetEasy price index over time. So that's where prices are at. We can see right now that Manhattan prices reached just over 1 million. Brooklyn's hovering around 700,000, and Queens is in the 500K range. So StreetEasy has our own way of tracing prices, which allows us to control for neighborhood, for the number of bedrooms, the composition of homes on the market, in a way that makes looking at price trends over time more accurate than just looking at median prices. So what's happening in New York City right now is very different from what's happening nationally. And it's no secret, if you've been on the market for quite a while now, that the sales market in New York City has been slowing down, as we can see here, and then just recently coming up again. So we're going to break down why that is in some more detail. So now we're looking at year-over-year changes in prices, which is the previous chart of the price index, but the rate at which they grow or fall each year. And we can see that as of very recently, prices have started to trend upwards. And that's only something that's been happening in the last 2 months. Nationally, I'm sure you've seen the headlines about prices soaring across the country and inventory shortages, but I want to emphasize and reassure you that that's not the case in New York City. New York City's sales market is very different. We are seeing very moderate price growth after years of no growth and after years of prices falling in Manhattan and Brooklyn. So I don't anticipate prices jumping up to the double-digit 10% increases year over year for the foreseeable future, as we've seen in other cities. To break down a bit what's happening in New York City, Manhattan prices have been falling year over year by over 5% for the past 3 years. And we've just finally seen prices in Manhattan start to go up in the past 2 months. Brooklyn prices were falling around 2% year over year and now are recovering as well. And Queens prices have remained fairly steady compared to Manhattan and Brooklyn. So these numbers really reflect the supply of homes on the market. We'll dive into inventory and demand, which comes from pending sales. So a lot of people are looking to sell right now. That's really high supply, but there's also a lot of people looking to buy right now, which is high demand. And we're seeing this back and forth of supply and demand that's really influencing the sales market. So we'll dive into that, but first let's look at how the pandemic has impacted the sales market. So the pandemic has had really different effects on the rentals and the sales market. And it's important context because we are always hearing in the news about how rents have fallen dramatically over the pandemic and have started to rise rapidly. And that's a very different story with what's happening on the sales market right now. So to get a sense of this, we are looking at the blue chart, which is the sales market trends, and then the pink line is the rent index. We can see that there's very dramatically different paths here. The rentals market slowdown was something that fully reacted to the pandemic and was a very quick drop and then a very quick recovery. On the sales market, though, the sales market trends have existed before the pandemic. So we've seen the sales market slow down over time for several years now, and the pandemic has only exacerbated that trend going forward. But now we are seeing that the sales market slowdown that was very gradual is starting to recover, and we'll talk about the factors now that have influenced that sales market change. So looking back at the last full quarter, this is Q2 data, we've seen a spike in pending sales. Pending sales are when a home goes into contract, and they're a very good indicator of the way that the sales market is trending because it shows us that buyer activity has been rising significantly in Manhattan, in Brooklyn, and in Queens. So we did see a pause in the pandemic during that dip, but now it's shot up as of the past quarter. And that makes sense because we're a year into the pandemic with the successful vaccine rollout, with buyers looking on the market for after a year of window shopping, with still pretty low mortgage rates and a lot of homes on the market for sale. It's been a really good time for many buyers to come onto the market and decide that now is the time to buy. And I'm sure that's also the reason why a lot of you are here right now being interested in buying a home for the first time. So many New York City buyers have declared that now is the time to make an offer, but don't worry because inventory is still elevated. So we're looking now at inventory. Inventory is the supply of homes on the market, the inventory that you'll find when you're searching through StreetEasy. We see that inventory is still very high compared to pre-pandemic levels. They reached record highs in the winter and have just begun to dip a bit, but that's not much to worry about. It's more so there's a lot of seasonality. There's more inventory in the winter in general. Now there's more demand coming onto the market. We're seeing a very slow drop in inventory compared to what's happening nationally. And so this is what makes the New York City market very different from what's happening nationally. Nationally, there is an inventory shortage, but in New York City, there's been a long time inventory surplus. That means a lot of possible options for you on the market, depending on what you're looking at. And if there are a lot of buyers looking at the same house and you don't get that offer, there might be 5 other homes on the market that are really, really similar that you love as well. So that's good news. There's a lot of homes on the market and possible inventory choices to look at. So we are hearing that buyers are returning to the market, but with spiked inventory levels, that's why prices have not begun to grow as quickly as they would otherwise. So it's still a very good time to be a buyer right now with plenty of choices and a lot of competition from other buyers, but still a lot of choices for you to look at. And if you are not too sure about buying a home, it might not be a bad idea to take some time to wait and see, because we are seeing that homes are spending longer times on the market. So median days on market, the amount of time that a home spends on StreetEasy from the moment it's listed to the moment it goes into contract, that has been increasing this past quarter. And some of this is due to seasonality. Some of it is due to just a lot of inventory on the market. And in fact, whereas homes nationally are coming off the market rapidly, we're seeing that's not the case in New York City. Homes are not flying off the market. There's a lot of demand, but there's a lot of supply. And so it's important to keep that in mind as you're looking for a home. Now, price cuts are when a listing on StreetEasy receives a discount while it's listed. And you can see that fewer sellers recently have been cutting prices on their homes quarter after quarter. And that's partly because of the heightened demand, but also sellers are already listing their prices pretty accurately. Sellers are listing their prices slightly higher than they were in the past, as we've seen in the price increases. And so many sellers are confident in their asking prices because they know that there's a lot of buyers on the market. But the shares of discounts are maybe lower than they typically would be in a spring shopping season. So there's still some discounts on the market, just not as much as we typically see. And we saw that in 2021, in the second quarter, 1 out of 5 homes were discounted, which is still a really good amount. But of course, in past years, we've seen higher. So even though only 1 in 5 homes received a discount while listed on StreetEasy, more than half of the homes on StreetEasy still closed below ask. So that means it's always a good idea to negotiate. Even if you're not seeing a discounted listing on the market, it's always a good idea to negotiate with the seller, because we're seeing that on average, homes close for as much as 6% below their asking price. And so Zillow did some research on how homes have been closing nationally and found that most homes are selling above ask. In New York City, the story is very different in that more than half of the homes are selling below ask. And in fact, there's not a single neighborhood where the average home did not sell below ask. So it's always a good idea to negotiate. That means negotiations are happening successfully in more than half of the transactions on the market from closing. And we're seeing also that there's a lot of neighborhoods on this list of neighborhoods with the biggest discounts between closing and asking, that there's a wide variety of prices represented here. So we do have some of the more expensive neighborhoods like Tribeca on this list. We also have some of the more affordable neighborhoods like Brighton Beach and Sheepshead Bay. So lots of variety there, but the key takeaway from this is just to make sure to negotiate. And for my last piece of data that I want to share today, we looked at the typical income of a first-time home buyer and pulled the neighborhoods that had the most homes that would be affordable to the typical first-time home buyer budget. And based on the typical budget, which is about a gross income of about $70K a year, that would mean you don't want to spend more than 30% of your income on rent to not be rent burdened. Of course, that's not the case for many New Yorkers, but just pulling from that data, we got to see the list of neighborhoods that had the most homes that would be affordable to someone working with that budget. And so we've done this data analysis in the past before, and we've seen that the neighborhoods have not changed too much from 2019. It's a wide variety of neighborhoods. We are seeing that two of the new neighborhoods on this list that are different from 2019 are Upper East Side and Flushing. So a lot more Manhattan neighborhoods represented on this list now. And we're seeing a lot of these neighborhoods also coming from Queens, which is a very hot market right now, and also a great option for anyone who's seeking greater affordability. So these are some neighborhoods to check out. And of course, to be able to do research on all the neighborhoods that are possible and think about other neighborhoods is always a very important part of the home search process. So if you're curious about more neighborhoods and trends, we have our StreetEasy Data Dashboard, which is an interactive dashboard that you can play around with if you're interested in buying these. This dashboard will show all of the trends that we went over of all of our market trends as well as individual neighborhood trends. And so you can use this as an opportunity to personalize the data, to zoom in on a specific neighborhood, to compare across neighborhoods and look at factors that are important to you. And lastly, be sure to visit our blog for all of the research that we've just presented and to see all of our market reports that are coming out every month and every quarter about our new data. And feel free to follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn to stay connected and ask any questions. And I'm also on StreetEasy's TikTok, sharing a lot of tips for renters, for buyers, for everyone out there on the market. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll turn it over to Peter.
Wow, thank you, Nancy. That was an incredibly useful market overview, especially considering today's market. Hey everyone, as Carlo mentioned earlier, I'm Peter Lim, a product manager here at StreetEasy. I'm here to talk to you today briefly about how to use StreetEasy to simplify your home search. The first thing to know, StreetEasy is designed and built specifically for New York City. We are a Zillow brand, but created by and for New Yorkers. And there are a few ways in which StreetEasy is uniquely suited to the New York home search. The first thing is our filters you can use for searching. If you're not familiar with them, particularly our advanced filters, I encourage you to go to StreetEasy and start search and explore the options available. Right at the top of the search page, you'll see filters that correspond to the features we've learned New Yorkers want the most. There's the ability to filter for units that allow pets, different kind of outdoor spaces, and different kind of views. You can search for apartments that allow pied-à-terres or have in-unit laundry or even a doormat. You can even search for apartments that are convenient to a specific subway line or by the age of the building. These filters are really nice because you start to figure out what you want in an apartment. You can refine your search and filters and make sure that you're only seeing what you actually want to see. Now, when you figure out your ideal search, your preferred location and apartment features, make sure you save the StreetEasy search for that. There's a button to save it at the top right of the page, and that way you'll get a notification whenever new listings appear on the market that matches your search criteria. As Nancy told us earlier, it's a busy market, so it's really helpful to be immediately notified when a new place that fits your criteria hits the market. Moving on to our next set of tools, we now include virtual tours on StreetEasy. Once you have all the right filters set up, it's time to take a closer look at those listings. Some of my favorite tools we offer have become so much more important over the past year and a half, including our virtual touring and 3D tour products. Not only can they help you if you're uncomfortable with a busy open house, or if you're searching from outside New York City, but they can save you a lot of time and energy by eliminating the need to physically visit homes that aren't the right fit. StreetEasy allows agents and homeowners to add walkthrough video tours, 3D home tours, or set up video calls with prospective buyers directly on a listing. If you're conducting your apartment search remotely, these virtual tools are a huge help, and they can also be pretty fun. While perfecting your online search is important, the other key piece to get right is finding the best agent to represent you as a buyer. Going beyond the online search, StreetEasy will also match you with a vetted, top-performing agent who has the skills, knowledge, and local expertise you need to navigate the process of buying a home in New York City. In just a few minutes, I'll welcome back Carlo to the screen, and he'll be joined by Scott Savory, an associate licensed broker at Compass. Scott is also a partner agent in our experts program. StreetEasy qualifies agents to join the experts program based on their deal history and customer satisfaction scores, meaning experts agents are both deeply knowledgeable and great to work with. Just as you see on the screen here, you'll see experts listed on a growing number of sale listings on StreetEasy. These agents have proven experience working in specific buildings or within similar homes in the areas you're searching for. When you look at a StreetEasy listing, you'll see the names and photos of the agents we verified as experts for that listing. You can then click on their names to see their relevant deal histories. One important thing worth calling out is that contacting a StreetEasy expert does not oblige you to work with them. You have a choice in deciding which agent you would like to represent you, and we encourage you to do your due diligence and make sure you're choosing the right person to represent you throughout the process. Okay, that's all the time I have. Thank you all so much. I'm now going to welcome back Carlo to the screen, who will introduce you to Scott. We'll talk a lot more about the benefits of buyer's agents and what to expect throughout the entire home buying process. I'll be back for Q&A.
Thank you, Peter, for taking us inside the StreetEasy platform from a product perspective. It's very exciting to see the continued innovation of tools that help home buyers and sellers with their processes. Now, I'm excited to welcome associate real estate broker at Compass and StreetEasy expert Scott Savory to walk us through the ins and outs of the home buying journey. Scott has nearly a decade of experience in New York City real estate and he has developed an industry-wide reputation for his sharp attention to detail, abiding client relationships, and skills in navigating unique markets. I'm excited for all of you to get his insight into this process. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, everyone. Excited to be here and excited to chat all things real estate.
It's great to have you. Thank you for joining us. Peter just gave an overview of some StreetEasy tools for home buyers and also explained the benefits of the StreetEasy Experts program. And on that note, I just want to start with one of the most popular questions we get from prospective buyers, which is, why should I work with a buyer's agent? Can I just do this on my own?
I think for a lot of people, they try to do it on their own and some succeed. But considering it doesn't cost you anything to have a buyer's broker and have a professional by your side, as the commission's paid through the sale of a listing from the seller, it makes no sense to do this on your own. When you have a professional who can help you navigate the ins and outs of the market, who has connections to what's happening within the industry, and who can save you a ton of time and energy and take away most of the stress of this process.
So you can have a professional working with you, there's no cost, and there's a lot of benefit. That makes sense. So next question, how do you recommend a buyer goes about finding an agent, and when should they get someone involved?
I would say the first thing is reach out to friends and family, see if anyone that you know has worked with someone they like and trust and who's knowledgeable in the industry. And if not, you can reach out to StreetEasy, which has the experts program, which includes agents like myself who are here to help and who've been vetted by the company.
So start with family and friends, and then think of StreetEasy as a friend that has a lot of data on who the best agents in the city are, and can connect you with them directly.
Agreed.
So just want to reiterate this point because, again, it's a question that we get a lot. How much will it cost me to work with a buyer's agent?
Zero cost. And that is kind of an amazing thing to have a professional dedicate time, energy, resources, knowledge to you. And in New York City, there's zero cost to the buyer. So you've got someone to give you all of these resources and their experience and knowledge in this process. So it's quite easy and doesn't cost you a thing to work with a professional.
Sounds like a good trade. So you found an expert buyer's agent. Who are the other professionals that I need on my home buying team?
You definitely need a mortgage broker and an attorney.
And what's different for the buyer for different home types? Co-ops versus condos, new developments versus townhouses?
That's a great question. Each are completely different, and for many people, they will be sort of dictated by the price or budget of the buyer. But to give a general or quick overview, co-ops make up the majority of our market, almost 75%. So we sort of see a lot of listings in lower price just because of the number of listings that they are, but they're a little more restrictive. For some people, you know, they're perfect because generally because of the strict rental rules, you don't see a lot of renters, you have a consistency of neighbors in your building. For many, it's a better long-term buy. Also, I like to tell people with co-ops, just because of when they were built, they were generally built larger than most of the condos we see today, developers maximizing square footage and floor plate. Condos work very well for people who want investments and flexibility. So let's say you bought a condo and 4 years into it or 3 years into it, you decided that you have a new job opportunity somewhere else and you wanted to leave and rent that unit out indefinitely, you totally can. It also functions well as an investment because you can leverage some equity that you've got in the property, buy something else and hold on to that unit if it's doing well. For many, townhouses are a great choice. It's sort of the Brooklyn dream for a lot of people. And in New York, you know, they're generally right next to the park. Bigger houses, for some people, getting a 2-family could be amazing because you can offset some of your monthly costs. And that inventory from an investment perspective is always amazing because it doesn't grow. What is there for townhouses is just generally there. So supply and demand just over time pushes prices up on that.
So there are a lot of nuances here with the product types, and different product types are more relevant for different buyers depending on their priorities. And it sounds like that's another reason why it's extremely valuable to work with an expert in the market, and potentially specific to the neighborhoods where you're looking, to guide you through the process. Because it's very easy to go on search and just see everything, but not necessarily know if it's best for you based on your priorities. Appreciate the insight. So you mentioned that the other members of the team, in addition to the buyer's agent, said an attorney, a lender. In terms of timeline, do you recommend I reach out to a lender and know my budget before I start working with a buyer's agent?
Yes. For many people, you sort of figure that out first. Having an idea of how much you can afford based on your income, what you're comfortable with spending on a monthly basis is the first step of the process. You don't want to go out and look at apartments for 3 to 6 months or 4 months and run into something you love, then speak to a banker and find out that you can't afford it. So speaking to a banker first, having an idea of what you can afford is great. And then even speaking to a broker, and that broker can then point you in the direction of a great banker, and work in tandem to figure out what your budget is, and then you can set all the guidelines after that.
I think you make a great point. So it's important to know your budget, know your purchasing power before you go out there, but you may not have a relationship with a lender, and so working with a buyer's agent to find a good one is another way to do it.
Yes.
So once I have found something I love, realistically, what does a typical timeline look between the initial offer and the closing date?
Can go pretty quickly depending on the product type that you're purchasing and whether you're financing or not. So let's say it's a townhouse, there's no board approval process, and you're buying cash, you could be closed in 30 days. If you're financing, 40 to 60 days, but in general, we say 30 to 90 days. If you're purchasing a co-op and the co-op has a board interview process, and maybe we missed the date, you have to wait another 2 to 4 weeks to have that approval process. It could change the timeline, but general overview would just be 30 to 90 days for most people.
But it can go much longer than that, and it could be specific to the building, is what you're saying.
That is correct.
Okay. And you alluded to this already, but just wanted to double click on it. Is there a difference in timeline for different home types, co-ops, condos, new developments, townhouses? Again, very nuanced, very different product types. How does that affect the timeline?
Totally, there is a difference. Townhouse is generally very quick. It's a single family or 2-family house. There's no board involved. Condo approval can be quick, but at the same time, if you're buying a new dev condo and that developer, that building that's new ground up has an issue with, one of the approval processes, it can push your closing date by weeks or months. I've had deals in the past that have been pushed by a year in new development. So it totally differs and varies.
Got it. Townhouse, potentially the fastest, similar to what Nancy was saying earlier about the rest of the country, which largely houses can happen quickly. New developments, potentially a much longer timeline.
Correct.
Got it. So now we've signed a contract. We found a place that we love. We're at the closing table. How much can I expect to spend on closing costs?
Anywhere between 4 and 6% for a buyer.
And what does that entail?
That's your attorney fees, your mortgage, title, and recording taxes, your transfer taxes. For a new development, it could be up to almost 2% on, sellers' attorney fees and transfer taxes. So these things can differ just based, again, on product type.
Got it. Mansion tax as well is a significant one if you're over a million.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And what are some of the potentially hidden closing costs that might be missed if you're not working with an expert buyer's agent? I think you alluded to a couple of them, but
very good question. And I've run into it where even a lot of brokers will forget about this. And touching on an earlier point, which is whether having an agent is good or not, I've seen scenarios where, let's say, buying in a new development, not a lot of people are aware of this, but developers actually have the buyer pay their transfer taxes and attorney fees. Yes, that's correct, attorney fees of the developer. And this is a negotiating point, but if you don't know, for many, you can make an offer, have it accepted, sign a contract, and get to the closing table and find out that you owe an additional 2% in closing costs, which is cash out of pocket. cannot be financed. So all of a sudden people are like, whoa, where did this come from? And that can be a big surprise. And having an agent by your side to say, oh, did you know that we have, this talking point here, which can or can't be negotiated based on where the market is, how well the building is doing, stuff like that.
Interesting. So there's a lot of stuff that can fly under the radar, but that's another reason to have an experienced professional who, goes through this process on a regular basis in your corner, making sure to catch these things. As far as other things to be caught, one thing that buyers say is really valuable in a buyer's agent is making sure that, things are caught in the walkthrough and inspection process, that they're buying a home that is sound and will hold up. What are the typical final walkthrough things that a buyer should consider to protect themselves? And should they hire an inspector?
That's a great question. And it also goes back to certain product types. What I like to tell buyers is, with condos and co-ops, you're responsible for everything within your paint job. Anything outside of your paint job is generally the responsibility of the building. So should you have a leak from the neighbor above, that's the responsibility of the building. And if you're buying a townhouse, 100% you need an inspector. So that includes, structural damage, termites, water, roof, boiler, all these things. But a lot of times the boiler, the roof is the responsibility of the building, which will catch those notes in the minutes of the building. Having an inspector come into a condo or co-op, generally you and your broker can test or assess most of the working items within a unit. But the simplest thing for buyers is, look, if spending $1,000 to $1,500 on inspection on $1 million sale will make you sleep better at night, 100% bring in an inspector.
Got it. Specific to the product type again, and also very specific to your comfort level.
Yes.
Got it. Any final tips for buyers in the audience before we go direct to their questions?
Find a great broker that you love and you trust and you want to work with, who's going to take away most of the stress of this process and make it amazing.
Very valuable insight. Appreciate that, Scott. And please stay with us for the Q&A. This has been incredibly informative. Again, thank you very much, Scott. I'm sure that all the buyers in the audience have a much better understanding of what it's really like to buy a home in New York City right now. And at this point, I'd love to jump into our questions from the audience. Let's invite Nancy and Peter back to the screen and dig into some of these topics for the remainder of our time. So our first question is from Molly H. She asks, what are the advantages and disadvantages of buying now versus waiting until next year? And maybe I'll throw it to Nancy first to talk about how the market has changed.
So I would say that, of course, the best time to buy is always a personal choice, and timing the market is difficult, if not impossible. That's something as an economist I've always been trying to figure out, but of course it's very difficult. So I would say the pros of buying this year and now is that there's a lot of inventory on the market. We see that inventory is starting to fall. Prices might rise even more in the upcoming months, as we've seen that prices have already started to rise. But the pros for next year is that maybe there will be fewer buyers on the market and sellers could be more willing to negotiate. Either way, it's a pretty hot market, but it's a good time to buy right now and in the future, I would say. And honestly, the trends in the sales market move so slowly usually that I'm not sure it'll even make much of a difference to wait. So it really comes down to a personal choice and when is the best time to buy for you and when you find the home of your dreams on the market.
Scott, anything to add to that?
I agree with most of Nancy's comments. I think they're amazing. I would say one that could lend to buying now or sooner versus later are mortgage rates, which for a lot of people we know are at historic lows and might go up. So next year you might be buying the same apartment for the same price, but it's just going to cost you more. So for a lot of people, I think they're trying to take advantage of where rates are today. We've had a really strong year this year and we've seen a little bit of a slowdown in August, but we'll see what the fall looks like. And we know that things might potentially go up because the data is coming out and we're seeing the market climb.
Good point. Good point on rates. So for our next question, Michael T asks, how much time should I plan for between a rental lease ending and moving into a newly purchased home?
This is a great question. I always say 4 to 6 months, but what I like to tell clients also is a lease shouldn't really stop you from making such a significant purchase in your life, especially one that's probably going to be financially beneficial, especially if it's one that's, oh, we have to re-sign this lease and I'm looking to purchase this home and I've gotten a great deal. Sometimes you can negotiate with your landlord to exit that lease, assign the lease, or maybe there's a 1 or 2 month penalty for breaking a lease. And I like to tell people a lease or a rental shouldn't really dictate, this massive purchase or significant life event that you might have. Let's say you missed the date for the lease ending and you need to re-sign. Maybe you do a 3-month or 6-month extension and still stay focused on your sale purchase, but generally 4 to 6 months out if you're trying to plan ahead.
It sounds like this question might also relate to some points you made earlier about different product types, and that timeline could be different depending on what type of product they're looking to purchase.
Yeah, totally. I've run into multiple scenarios where someone tries to time it perfectly, but let's say the co-op board takes forever to give an approval. We run into a situation where the buyer needs to move out of their current lease or space into this new purchase, but we just don't have approvals, and we have to negotiate with the landlords to figure out whether it's a 30 or 60-day extension on the lease, or worst case scenario, rent a hotel, or figure that out. But product type can definitely dictate timeline.
Good, appreciate that. Better safe than sorry, and yeah, we could all end up in a hotel. Susanna asks, what are co-op and condo monthly maintenance fees, and why are they often more than a monthly mortgage payment? Is that normal?
Great question. So the fees are generally for the upkeep of the building. Co-ops and condos differ a little bit. Co-op has maintenance, which includes your taxes, as the building pays the taxes as a whole, and generally at the end of the year, you'll get deductibility on those taxes. With a condo, you have your common charges and your taxes, which are separate. Common charges will go towards paying, super or a maintenance company to take care of shoveling, garbage removal, cleaning the hallways, etc. But in general, and I've never really seen where and this could actually depend on how much money you've put down in financing, the mortgage payment towards the actual principal of your mortgage is generally higher than the co-op and condo fees for maintenance and taxes.
I also wanted to just call out that we have filters for maintenance and taxes in our advanced search results, and also a mortgage calculator on listings that will help you gauge your all-in estimated monthly payments on StreetEasy listings.
Interesting, very valuable tool. So if monthly maintenance fees is something that you're conscious of, your monthly carry is something that's important, and you want to look for a building that has, or an apartment that has lower monthly maintenance fees, there are tools on StreetEasy that allow you to filter for that. Is that correct, Peter?
Yep, you nailed it.
Cool, awesome. The other thing I would add with regard to the monthly mortgage payment, obviously that's significantly variable, as Scott mentioned. If you're interested to learn more about financing, I would recommend tuning into part 2 of this series, of our Fall Home Buyer series, where we'll be speaking with some finance professionals who will share more about the financing process. So great question, Susanna, and more information in part 2. Next question is from Morgan C. Will the New York City real estate market be affected when the eviction ban is lifted?
Sorry, Carla, I'm tackling this one, right?
Scott, go for it.
I think we're definitely going to see some movement and changes in the multifamily market, where most of these rentals will potentially come up. I do hope that the city figures out a way with landlords and tenants to balance this upcoming challenge that we have. On the sales market, yet to be told, just because I think the inventory that's going to come to market will definitely affect rental prices. Not so much on the sales front. On the multifamily market side, definitely.
I'll just add that many landlords are likely to work with tenants on a mutually beneficial solution, such as a repayment plan rather than evicting. And both landlords and tenants should know their protections within their local jurisdiction and pursue all options provided by local, state, and government renter aid programs to mitigate any financial losses and to keep renters in their homes.
That's great advice. Next question. Jan M asks, how much of a discount to the asking price can I make to still be considered a serious bidder? Is it 5%, 20%? What's the max? And I guess I'll throw this to Nancy first, and then Scott from the agent perspective.
So from StreetEasy's research, we did show and we saw that the median discount of a home from the sale to list price ratio was about 5%, or 6% was the highest, but more than half of homes close below ask. And so when negotiating, we've seen in many of these neighborhoods that we showed that the list of 10 that had around a 5% difference between the closing price and the asking price. But I would be really curious to hear Scott's perspective on what's happening on the market, on the ground.
Great note, Nancy, and I agree with that. Generally, we see, and I tell clients generally between like a 5 and 8% discount normally, but I think this is completely dependent on where a home is priced. Do you have a seller who's listened to their broker and a broker who's done the diligence to price the home well? Is it at market, below market, or above market? And if above market, we'll see a huge discount from where it was listed to where it eventually trades. I like to tell people we're in an era today, or an age where data is in abundance, and we have a lot of it because now we've been accumulating data for about 10 plus years. And we can look at all the trades and say, look, something where this neighborhood and this product type is trading at $1,000 a foot, and this is listed at $1,200. Why is it at $1,200? Does it have something special? Does it have amazing outdoor space? What makes this unique? Or is a seller and broker just overpricing this property, hoping that someone pays for it when it's very similar to the other, like kind units? And yeah, I think it's just a little bit of where it's priced, how it's priced, whether it's correct or incorrect, and how motivated that seller is.
Good point. Yet another reason to have an experienced professional in your corner to perhaps guide on the specific situation and what kind of discount to ask might be appropriate depending on that. So the next question is from Michelle R, and she asks, what are the red flags to look out for a first-time home buyer when researching potentials and attending open houses? I think I'll throw this to Pete first to talk about things that they can see on the site, and then Scott and Nancy, feel free to join in as well.
Thanks, Carla. Yeah, so it might be hard to really notice any red flags when you're simply looking at pictures and descriptions of a listing. Another call out to our virtual tours. They're a great way to dive a bit deeper into the specific layout and details of that actual unit. And I would also recommend checking out StreetEasy's building pages and past listings, specifically for the unit that you're interested in. It's a great way to look at the data for that particular building and neighborhood, see all the amenities that the building has to offer, and also specifically for an individual unit history, just seeing what the listing previously listed at, past sale activity for that individual unit, and any catches that you might see within the pictures or descriptions from the past.
I would say you should definitely take a look at the exterior of the building and your surrounding neighborhoods. You might want to see whether you're in front of a bus stop, whether it's going to be noisy, if you're above a subway, a restaurant, etc. And then in the unit and building, you want to see the condition of the building. Assessing that can definitely give you an idea of how well the building is run and how well the residents within the building function, and if they're taking care of that. That can be a huge red flag on whether you're going to have a good time living in this building, whether you have leaks, whether it's going to be cleaned, etc. And then some questions that you might want to ask the agent who's hosting that open house: the motivations of the seller, why they're selling, and also if there's any upcoming assessments. Do you have a broken elevator, or does the roof need to be fixed? And whether it's a co-op or condo, the way those fees for upcoming work that's going to be distributed could be very impactful to your monthly payment.
Wow, those are a lot of very valuable things to consider, and important to take a look in person in those instances. Well, we're out of time. I hope everyone learned something in today's session and feels more prepared to navigate the buying process in New York City. If you'd like to learn more about financing, as I mentioned, or how to go about setting your budget, I'd encourage you to tune in for part 2 of our Fall Homebuyer series, featuring a New York City-based loan officer and a financial planner. And if you're looking for more advice, guides, and research for buyers, I strongly encourage you to visit the StreetEasy blog at streeteasy.com/blog, where you can find that and much more. And also, please remember to fill out our survey, which you'll see right after the webinar ends. Your responses inform the content of our future events, so it's really important. We're answering your questions. Thank you again to Nancy, Peter, and Scott, and to everyone watching for tuning in today, and enjoy the rest of your week.